joining us, and we'd like to give a big shout out to, we've got people joining us from New Zealand and from Malaysia and from Japan. So we'd like to give a big shout out to all of those people who are a long way away, as well as everyone who's in Australia. And what we'd love you to do is just, if you can tweet where you are right now, just use hashtag KPFBake. Let us know where you are, and because we want to know where you are. We're here in Brisbane, and we're ready to bake a cake.
Yeah, hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen. It's not very posh, and it's very small, but our cakes together today. So thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be a fairly simple cake. I'm going to take you through step by step, and if you've got any questions that you have while we're going along, you just post those. Can they post them on Facebook? Where do they post it?
If you're on the blog page now, which you have to be in order to be seeing us live, underneath the video you will see that there's a link to the TWABS page, and you can post, if you actually use on Twitter, if you use hashtag KPFBake, it'll come through on the TWABS page, so you can monitor other people's comments that are coming through. And also you can comment through Google+, there's a link there to do that, and you can comment on YouTube. And Whisper will be monitoring your comments, and so she's just a little bit caught up at the minute getting all our guests lined up. So we will be with you. We're not forgetting about you. We will be with you. We're just waiting for Whisper at headquarters to sort out those sort of.
So as long as they put that hashtag in whatever they're posting, we'll find.
Yes, hash KPFBake.
So if you're asking a question, you're shouting it out to me. I can't hear it just at the minute, but hopefully I'll explain enough to you to help you get through. But don't worry, if you're stuck, there's nothing going to go wrong with this cake. You can just wait, and this is what we're doing. But hopefully I'll show you, and maybe you'll even be seeing other people's posts and tweets, and they'll be helping. Between us, it's a wealth of knowledge, so please jump in and help each other answer those questions. So we're going to bake today, and we're going to bake a Christmas sort of cake, a cake that we can keep for Christmas. It will keep nicely for Christmas. It will make a beautiful gift. And it's a chocolate fruit cake, so I just thought we'd do a little bit of a sort of a twist on a fruit cake and make it a chocolate one. Now, if you are a person that doesn't particularly like fruit cake, you might find that you do like this one. And you can add, with this one, you can add as much or a little fruit as you like. So you can make it just a little bit of fruit, or you can leave the fruit out completely if you really want to. Or I think for the traditionalists may even feel that they don't want to put chocolate in it at all. So when we get to that stage, I'll show you how you can just make it as a fruit cake and not chocolate in it at all. But it really makes for quite a nice cake. And really quite popular because it's a nice light one. Again, the traditionalists will say, oh, I see that you're using self-raising flour, a raising agent. Normally they might use plain flour. So this one will be quite a lighter in terms of texture, and not perhaps such a dense, rich fruit cake. But as we go along, I can tell you how, if you prefer a cake that's a little bit denser, rich, I can tell you how you can make it like that. Okay, so we get started, and I'm going to be just using my hands. You feel free if you've got mixers and you want to use your mixer, I'll talk to you about that, but I do a lot of baking, believe it or not, by hand, and also it's a little bit less noisy for us, so I thought we could do that. But you feel free if you've got an electric hand mixer, or you've got a KitchenAid or something like that, you feel free, but really it'll be at that sort of the creaming stage of your butter and sugar that you'll need that. But after that, we'll move to hand. Even if you've made it in a mixer bowl, just take that bowl off and use that as your mixing bowl. We'll go by hand. Okay, now I know too that there will be some people who will want to perhaps make a gluten-free or dairy-free alternative, or even leave out eggs. And I know there's a few people joining us today who really do a lot of baking in that area, baking vegan, baking or gluten-free. As I've said in my recipe, feel free to swap out the Kialla cake flour or self-raising flour that you might be using and use a gluten-free mix. And for those people who are aiming to make a vegan version of the cake, please feel free. People like Holly. Holly, are you there in Brisbane? I can't hear you, but I think you're there online. And Holly's a naturopathic who specialises in both vegan and gluten-free diet. So she's more than happy to tweet and post some answers and queries if anybody's got any questions about that.
I'm just going to slip off screen and see
you
if you've got anything coming
All right,
through.
let's start with the butter. It's really important if you're using butter that your butter is softened but not melted. Quite often people think, oh, you know, they get it out of the fridge and it's rock hard, and of course, you know, it being in this part of the world, we need to keep things so refrigerated so much of the time. But you don't want your butter melted, because what's really important about the consistency of the butter is that the method of creaming it, and that's the sort of basically the beating of the butter with the sugar, is a way of getting air into your cake. If you've melted your butter, it won't be able to hold the air. So don't whiz it in the microwave. If you've got now in front of you rock hard butter, just cut it with a knife into sort of little slithers. Mine's softened. I've had mine out. Just cut it in little slithers and put it in your bowl, in the mixer bowl or by hand, and in no time it will come with the agitation of the mixing. It will come, but don't be tempted to melt it in a microwave. So you're looking for it for this sort of, you know, consistency, ideally, but definitely not melted. So you only ever use melted butter in cake making if it actually stays melted butter, don't ever melt your butter. It just needs softened like that. So that was the 200 grams of butter. So I'm assuming that you've measured your ingredients out and so on. And of course, the reason I'm using the measures rather than say cups and so on is because those measures, cups and volume and so on, are standardized around the world. Sometimes that can lead to recipes. I do refer to teaspoons, which is fairly standardized, but things like tablespoons. In Australia, our tablespoons are 20 mils, which is 4 teaspoons, whereas in the US and the UK it's only 3 teaspoons. So sometimes that makes a little difference in baking. So that's why I've gone to weights, and so I'm assuming that people will have access to scales or not. But the recipe is basically using the batter that binds the fruits and so on together. It's almost like a pound cake, butter cake, which is roughly equal quantities of fat, shortenings, butter, sugar, and flour. So it's basically that sort of a formula that we're working to, and then that is the structure that holds your fruits and so on, and then even if you want to put nuts in the cake, you don't have to do that. So what I love about fruitcake is it reminds me of like a sandwich. You can actually have it in like a sandwich that's chock a block, you like it sort of white on and so on. So you can really put whatever you like in fruitcake. I've chosen today to use, I suppose for me, quite traditional things for Christmas cake, currants and sultanas and raisins, and also some prunes. I love using dried plums. Do dried plums in my baking prunes, and I usually have some that I keep. These are conservatives with this, which is a plum brandy, but I often soak also my prunes in tea, which make a lovely bake. I had a really dark and moist. Okay, so we've got the butter in there now. Now we're going to put some sugar. I'm just leaning over you to get the sugar. I'm using a brown sugar, also called muscovado sugar. This is, of course, because it's brown, it's still got molasses still in it, because the fine molasses is still there. So I'm just adding that. That was a 200 too, like that. And you're using the mixer, you're putting this all in your mixer bowl. And I'm going to just start putting that together, bringing that together. I'll talk to you about what we're sort of looking for. Of course, this won't take much time at all in a mechanical mixer, but it's sometimes nice to just get really close to the ingredients and see how they change as you work with them, and you get a good sense of them, good feel of them. Part of this process is that the butter sort of starts to dissolve a bit into the butter. Sugar starts to dissolve into the butter, but it's really more about starting to put some air into it. And that's one of the good things about a big bowl like this. Give plenty of room to get the air into it. And already I can see it starting to get lighter. And it's getting lighter because air is coming into it. And I'm going to put some treacle in there, maybe dark treacle or something like that. Molasses, might know it as molasses. And that adds flavour and darkness and some sweetness, but it also helps to keep some moisture in baking, using treacles and syrups and so on. But it's really important if you're using treacles or syrups in your cooking that you measure them really accurately, because they do have quite a big impact on the results of your cake if you're using them. So that's one of the ingredients that's really important to measure accurately. So I'm just going to, this is a little 2 teaspoon measure. So I think it was about 3 teaspoons I'd said for you to put in. So it's a little bit tricky. One of the things you can do is if it's a bit thick, you can just warm it slightly in the microwave, which makes what you can do is if you just get a little bit of oil, cooking oil on your fingers and rub your spoon before you put the treacle in, it will just pour straight off the spoon. I love the smell of treacle, some sugar, some butter for Christmas cakes. Just a really special time of year for baking. It gets very hot here in Brisbane this time of year, but it's still nice to do Christmas baking. If you're using a mechanical mixer, you're probably finished by now, but you don't need to go much further than that. That you may have, while you're waiting, you may have started zesting your fruits, your oranges and lemons. So, you know, you're just taking off the zest off the outside of your fruits. Some, again, traditionalists possibly will use up candied peel and so on.
We just have a little bit of feedback from Amy that you're hard to hear, Gillian.
Oh, Amy, thank you.
Speak up.
It's my voice. Okay.
But it may be that our mic is not sensitive enough. So.
Okay, that's good feedback.
Yes,
thanks
Amy.
For that, Amy. So I'll try and speak louder. Take the zest of your oranges and lemons. Traditionalists might like to use candied fruit peel. I actually prefer to use fresh. I find that the balance between the dry fruits and so on, which are quite rich and sweet, with the fresh makes a really nice balance.
Yes.
It makes a really nice balance. So I always use fresh, but again, if you prefer to use like candied peel or the sort of traditional peel, do feel free to use that. And then, of course, you've still got your orange and lemon that you can use for your juice. You may have even wanted to zest it and then use the juice to soak your fruits in. I've actually soaked mine in some alcohol, but again, you can do that in fruit juice. You don't have to use alcohol. I hope you can all hear
What's your favourite alcohol for soaking fruit?
I actually soak my fruit in a fruit muscat, an orange floral muscat. I personally find some of the more stronger fortified wines, like the or rums or whichever, a little bit too rich for me.
Okay.
But again, it's one of those things. But that's the lovely thing about fruit cake. You can actually swap what you like, the sorts of fruits you like. I know lots of people like using, especially in this part of the world, tropical fruits. You know, in a fruit cake, which you can perfectly do, and apricots and things like that. Stone fruits.
Dried stone fruits?
Yeah, you can
okay.
sort of use dried.
Yep. I recall a fruitcake when I was a kid. I recall a fruitcake that had pineapple in it.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a bit of an Australian thing.
Yes. And I think that's what's lovely. You get those sort of regional variations and so on. But, you know, and that's the lovely thing too about baking and things like that, because you can take a recipe of some of the classics and just tweak them slightly to suit your own thing. Whereas, say, for example, this recipe, I've made it a touch lighter. That's lighter in texture and so on, because I prefer it slightly lighter. But,
and also, I guess, because we're in a summer climate for Christmas, you don't want your cakes to be too heavy.
Yeah.
There is that thing about if it's too heavy and rich.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to sit around in the air conditioning when you're eating it.
Yeah. So I've zested roughly 2 oranges and lemon, but you can add as much of that as you like. But I'm just going to add that to my fruits. Yeah, that'd be lovely if you could just pass it so we can just see that. That's my dried fruits that I've had soaking. And when you strain them off, you know, when you start, you'll get a little bit of residue, or you will if you're heavy-handed, as I am. But don't throw that away. I mean, if you haven't strained it off and it's still in there, go into the cake. It will just make the mix slightly wetter, but that's not a problem. But I like to keep that. And when it comes out of the oven, when it's still warm, I paint the top of my cake with one that stops it getting sort of a hard crust. A lot of people, you know, spike their cake and pour mixed alcohol into the, you know,
okay.
but I don't know. I find that for me a little bit too much, but that's the, you know, the traditional sort of way of doing it. So I'm just going to add that to there for when we get to the fruit stage. Just putting it in there with that, and that will just sit there until we're ready to get to that point. I just pass you those things out so we can let's clean up as we go. All right, so we've got that. We've got the treacle in there. We've got the butter. We've got the sugar. So now we'll go to some of our dry ingredients, and we've got 70 grams of almond milk. It's going to go in there. Oh, we need to put the eggs in, Gillian. Okay, we're going to do the eggs next. Now, you may have noticed in my recipe I said about 200 mils of eggs, or 200 grams of eggs. That's because I tend to use organic. I do use organic eggs, and from a small producer, and they come as they're laid. So they come in all different shapes and sizes, and so I sort of crack my eggs and weigh to get roughly what would be the equivalent weight.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because sometimes they're a bit smaller, and so you know how when you buy your eggs in the supermarket, it'll be that smaller.
Yes, and they grade them all.
That's it. Well, they've sorted and done that all for you.
Yes,
I've got them. Mine are like a mixed.
Yes, I can see here we have one giant egg and one little small egg.
Yes.
So you can see it's a lot of variation.
Yeah, but that's roughly, you're looking at roughly 4 large eggs if you've got the more consistent one. So I'm just going to weigh my eggs in here, and what I'm going to do is, if I've got a, you know, people say, oh, well, when you do that, what if you've got X, you know, you either side of that 200. I just like to sort of just look at the weight and where I'm going on the scales, and then think, well, right, well, I probably need a larger one now because I need to get a little bit closer to weight.
And I expect too that maybe a fruitcake's quite a forgiving kind of a cake.
Yeah, it is.
It's not like making a sponge cake or something like that.
No, it is very forgiving. I think some of the challenges people have with making a fruitcake is more to do with cooking, you know, knowing when it's ready.
Yes.
And coming out of the oven and thinking, has it been in there too long, or how will I know if it's cooked when it's so dark? You know, it's hard to sort of tell if it's cooked or not. And also that sense of, oh, it seems to be a lot of fruit goes into this batter. But the batter is almost, imagine the fruit is like the pebbles and the batter is the
concrete.
Holding it together. So you can have as many rocks in your wall as you like. So I'm getting there. I might actually need a little bit more than 4 eggs for mine.
But only 25 gram.
Yeah, only
this one here is
that's
tiny.
One. I'll put that in there. I'll keep that in the shells. Yeah, it's a little bit over, but what I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry about that, but I'm just going to keep a little bit of that egg white for a bit later on when I'm going to frost some of my fruits, because I'm going to use some egg white. So I'm just going to spoon that off to bring your weight down a little bit.
So if you can't, I'll just move this bowl
Yeah,
out of the way. So
all right, that's fine. They're just,
what you're doing.
that's all I'm doing is just taking that little bit just to bring it closer to my 200 weight. So if you, Madame, if you don't mind moving that out and move the scale. And I'm just going to break those up a little bit with my spoon. That's just so that you don't need to spend time trying to do that while you're just trying to combine it with your mixture in the bowl. So you're breaking that up a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit at a time and just combine, work it in. So we're just really bringing the ingredients together. We're not looking to beat it beyond that. And if you're using your mixer at this stage, just gently, okay, just bringing it together. You're not, you don't want to whip eggs when you're using them like this.
And why is that?
Well, you can actually toughen eggs by
okay.
doing that. You're actually just wanting it to come together. That's all you're wanting.
And what, the cake gets rubbery if the eggs are tough?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably a food scientist out there somewhere. That
if anyone knows, there's any baking aficionados out there who'd like to fill us in on the chemical reaction.
Food bloggers
tough
out there.
eggs.
Tanya might know. Yes. Tanya's out there, I know.
Yeah.
And but the it certainly, you do get a toughening of eggs if you're mixing them too hard. And you also might, it's important that your eggs are at room temperature. You're storing your eggs in your egg carton in the fridge, but when you want to use them for baking cakes, and that, you really do want them to be room temperature.
Okay, so that's nice and soft now. Sometimes I find when I mix butter and sugar and eggs that it kind of gets a bit curdly.
Yeah, that can happen. Sometimes that's to do with the temperature of the ingredients, but it's also to do with the mixture coming together of the two sort of elements of the fats and so on. The yolk is actually, a lot of it is lecithin, and so it's a natural most time these things together. But that can happen, and if that happens, you get curdling. Don't worry, it doesn't affect the flavour or anything of the cake. So you can just add some of the dry ingredients, just a teaspoon or two, a tablespoon, and that will solve that problem for you. So you will with this. Deborah, can you hear that?
Yes, we've got the wind chimes happening, have we?
Yes, that's my phone.
Oh, that's your phone. I thought it was somewhere out there with the wind blowing.
While I'm making a cake, and it's not working. Hopefully it will run out.
At least it's a nice sound. It's not like
yeah. So so we thought I'd turn my phone off, but of course I haven't.
Let's do fruit.
All right. Okay, I'm just adding the eggs. How are you going out there? Have you got any questions?
I'll just check to see if there's any questions coming through.
All right,
Amy asks, does it affect the cake mixture if it curdles? I think.
No, I mean, it looks a bit scary when it happens. It's mine starting to do that now. That's just a lot to do with quantity of, as I say, the ratio of the eggs. But no, it doesn't. But what you can do, as I say, if you just use a bit of your dry mix, which is coming up, and you can add that to just a little bit to it, and it will fix that. So don't panic if that's happening. Just add a little bit of dry mix like that to it, and that starts to solve that problem. As I say, I'm sure there's someone out there that is a food scientist and can explain that phenomenon in much more detail than I can. I always find those sorts of things really interesting. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to baking like that. All right, okay. So we basically put out most of our wet sort of stuff together. Now I'm going to just add my almond meal. This is what mine looks like because it's actually not blanched almond meal by one. Yours probably possibly looks whiter than that, but that's fine. That just means it hasn't been, you know, the skin's still on it. And, when it was ground into a meal.
Do you prefer non-blanched almond meal?
Well, it gives it a little bit more texture and flavour. So when I'm making a fruit cake or a darker cake, and it requires almond meal, I tend to use this type.
It's not a problem.
Whereas if you're looking perhaps to give a look for a cake that's a little softer texture look and a lighter colour, then you would use the blanched.
Like a friand or something?
Yeah. Well, you don't really want that sort of
speckly tea going on. a tweedy friand.
Or a tweedy jumper. So, but it all looks nice. So just bring it all together.
Is there a reason why you put the almond meal in now instead of, is there any kind of order to the dry ingredients?
Not really. It's just that if you probably tried to sieve that with your flour, you would have just ended up with the almond meal left to sieve because it's large.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just had it like that. But if you put it in last, it will be all right. And then I'm going to add, now the Kialla cake flour, let's talk a little bit about the Kialla cake flour because I'm using that here. The cake flour, you might have read on the Kialla
the blog. There was a blog that Gillian wrote, a guest blog on her love of flour, and she talked about cake flour. And would you just like to?
Yeah, well, basically, what's so lovely about cake flour for me is that it's the wheat variety is a Rosella wheat. You know more about it than I do, but it's a low protein grain, so that means that there's less gluten development in it, which makes it more tender. Because different types of flour with different types of grain, and I think we've got Rob at some point.
Yes.
Rob,
Rob,
please correct me if I'm getting anything wrong. But the different varieties of wheat have different levels of protein, you know, and that lends itself to different baking
results.
Yeah.
For example, what I do know is that generally a lot of the plain, our normal plain flour, such as you will get in what we call our hero packs, that will tend to be excellent for bread and for those kind of baked goods. And the cake flour, of course, is specifically designed to make a softer result. That's how I understand it. That's how
because there's less protein in it. It's less, therefore, less capacity for development, and which is what you really want for eating and things like that. What gives you that lovely structure which captures the air and gives you that nice.
Right. Okay.
Less protein, therefore you've got less gluten. What I've got in here is cake flour. That would be like a plain flour. You can add, I think I put in there about baking powder. Again, it's really important when you measure your baking powder that you get that as putting that in even, a level spoon, not a heaped spoon or anything like that. So it's really important to. Now you can make your own self-raising flour because it's just basically plain flour that's had the all-purpose flour in other parts of the world. With the raising agents already mixed in for you. So if you're short on self-raising flour and your favourite recipe usually calls for self-raising flour, and you've got probably cake flour, you just for every cup of cake flour, you just add 2 level teaspoons of baking powder to it.
And sometimes I've made my own baking powder mix, which
might be a little
bit dodgy. But that essentially it's bicarb soda and cream of tartar, isn't it?
Well, yes, modern baking powder. Yeah, because there's a whole blog post you can do about baking powder. Okay. Some things like bicarb soda and so on will react immediately. Yes. Whereas some of the other ingredients like the cream tartars and so on, so you've got an acid and alkaline mix. But some of the modern baking powders are also meant some of them to react once there's heat.
Oh,
so that
okay.
you don't, so there's not that rush to get things in the oven.
Oh, I see. Oh, that. Oh,
So
now I
there's some
understand.
things that are released with the carbon dioxide early on in
Okay.
baking, and then some will react once there's heat. So once the thing is in the
Right.
oven.
Okay.
So when you're making your own baking powder, you might be making a recipe that might be the fast-acting quick ones,
Yes.
like here and now ones, like to using lots of.
Oh, I'm learning a lot about baking.
Well, yeah. So yeah, you can of course make your own baking powder, and there might be some people out there who've done that and have actually recipes for it.
Anyone got any tips on baking
that
powder?
one I
Please
usually,
tweet us.
yeah, on baking powders themselves. And it's really interesting because, well, anyway, you probably I could go right off downstream about acids and alkalines, but I won't. It's not a science lesson.
In the lab with Julian.
Yeah, frustrating. Okay, so I'm still adding all I'm doing here while we're chatting is just folding these things in. So, okay, make sure that your baking powder is well mixed in with your flour, so it's evenly distributed. Because that's one of the most important things that when you add your own baking powder to your dry mix is that it's sifted, one, to get the lumps out, because you don't want to be here trying to get the lumps out of your cake. You want to get rid of the lumps before it gets in here, but also that you're distributing the baking powder evenly through the mix.
Okay.
So that's really important. So what I usually do, if I'm, because I usually make up a good batch of it.
Oh, okay.
I make myself resin that. So I have a great thing. I put all this thing in, the baking powder in, and then I'll whisk it and toss it so it mixes
very well.
Well, and then I've also put cocoa powder in there. Now, if you wanted to make this as a traditional fruit cake without it being a chocolate one, I think what was it? 40 grams, did I say, of cocoa powder? I can't remember. Yep. So what you would do is just not include the cocoa powder and just add that equivalent amount of spilled flour. So even when you're sort of making a cake that you sort of want to make as a chocolate cake using cocoa, just sort of take out roughly the equivalent amount of flour if you want to add the thing. And also, if you wanted to make it a really sort of dense, richer chocolate cake, you can also melt chocolate and add that in at this stage into the thing. So, but this the cocoa powder that we've got there is beautiful. It's the Organic Times.
The Organic Times cocoa powder. In fact, the winner of the hamper today will get some Organic Times cocoa powder.
Yeah. So I'm still putting that in. How are you all going? I hope you're going well.
Let us know if you're having any challenges. You've been explaining it really clearly.
Yeah, well, but also, there are many ways to, bake a cake, and people come with their own ideas, and that's what's really lovely about baking, because you learn so much from others. And I know that from my baking list. People say, "Oh, that's interesting. I don't do it that way. I do it that way," or "Why do you do that?" And really is a wealth of knowledge. Now, also, you might have. I usually use an apple sauce in my my fruit cakes. Yeah. One, because I find it. It's also, I don't add any sugar to mine when I make it, but it loosens. But it adds some fruit to it. In the whole genre of making a fruit cake, it loosens it and it keeps it really nice and moist. But if you, don't go as far as to making your own. Somebody has tweeted or asked a question that I didn't put the oven temperature in the recipe, which was pretty cool. That's generally because I don't tend to follow this recipe, the temperatures they put in recipes. I find that they're too hot. But anyway, I suggest that you set your ovens at about 140 degrees Celsius, that is. The other thing is, if you are able to turn the fan off in your oven, if you have a modern oven that's got a fan force or fan assist, if you're able to turn the fan off in your oven, I recommend you do. I don't bake with a fan. I find it too drying on my cakes. I like to have a moist cake. And one of the things about baking a cake is that you don't want that sort of crust to form too early. It's why you often get sort of ball size and a big dome top. It's because the oven's too hot and dry. Yeah, an oven's dry, but the fan actually makes it dries the surface out of the cake. So one of the ways in which you can counter that, of course, is the way you prepare your tin and how the cake goes into the oven. So you can actually watch your oven if you can't turn the fan off. So I'm just going to rest my little cake there for a minute because I can. We can do that with this cake. What I have done, you remember I asked you to cut out 4 of your circles. I've put 2 of those in the bottom of my tin, and then I've made what I call a collar of baking paper or baking parchment, and I've lined the inside of the tin. Okay, I hope you can see that. Can you see that?
Oh yes, I can see.
Yeah. So I do that, and that is actually higher than the edge of the tin. So it's like a little wall up around the tin, and that stops because if you have it level with the tin, level with the height of the tin, the fan, the hot air blows across the surface of the cake, drying it out. So if you put this is what I do, put the wall, we'll call it that, up higher, it actually acts like a little windbreak, protects the surface of it. So that's what I've done inside the tin. I've put 2 of those in the bottom. So if you haven't cut yours out yet, see if you want to do that. I just find, some people will just butter or flour their tin. I like to use the papers only because I find that then I've got no problem, especially if you're making a cake that's got sort of quite a lot of sugar content in it.
Amy's saying she didn't catch the temperature for the oven.
Oh, did I actually say it? Yes, I reckon about 140. Somebody's asking again about the oven. 140. So I know one of the things why I'm sounding so hesitant, people's ovens can be very different, depending on how modern your oven is, and sometimes your oven is not running as accurately as what your dials might say. And so what I always do is use almost carry it in my handbag, like a little oven temperature. So if I'm using a strange oven, I'll use that to actually test what the actual temperature of the oven is, because your gauge might be saying you've set it to a certain temperature and the light might say it's ready. It actually might leave it out. So it's always good. You can just buy them cheap in the kitchen shops, those oven temperatures, and just put them in to actually see what you think your temperature is running at, and then adjust accordingly. You're going for a lowish temperature when you're baking a fruit cake, because you wanted it in the oven for quite a while. It's not a quick rise cake like a sponge or whatever, on a hotter temperature. You want it to be in there a longer time, so it's sort of long and slow cooked. And that lining, I always find, helps me remove a cake from its tin without any dramas. So that's what I do. It's it's a little bit of extra, but I find when you spend time making the cake, you spend time sourcing beautiful ingredients, and then you don't want to be just that last minute thing of it not coming out nicely. So I've done that, lined it, and then what I've done also is used a little bit of cardboard or brown paper. We can use newspaper, and I've just basically wrapped it around. What I'm attempting to do is insulate the tin a little bit, because with a baking tin, obviously the surface of the tin gets hot, a lot hotter, quicker than the centre of your cake. So what you're aiming to do is not let the outside edges harden up too soon before the centre, because otherwise you'll get that sort of low, hard outside and a doughy top, because it still wants to rise, but the sides have set. So that's why you do that. That is what that little trick is all about. If you've ever wondered why there's this big fuss about preparing a tin. So what you're wanting to do is create an environment in which the whole mixture is sort of heating at the same time, and then you'll get a rise in your cake that's much more even. You won't get that sort of dough. If you're getting those cracking, in a round tin, in a round cake, it's going to be again because it's too high, and you're getting a crust forming too early, and yet the mixture below is like a molten volcano, and it's bursting through. That's why you're getting a splitting cake. So that's what we're doing today. But if you haven't got all that prepared and you haven't got that stuff now, not to worry. But that is something you might want to think about for the future, or when you're doing cakes that you're in the oven for quite a while. Okay, so I hope those people who are quite rightly picking me up on preheating an oven. So, is that the question coming in?
Hang on. Kimmy wants to know a substitute for applesauce.
A fresh apple.
Or maybe she doesn't like apples.
Oh, okay. Apricot puree, any sort of fruit thing, or you could even use some of your fruit juice. It's really just to loosen the mixture. You're not adding milk. You're not adding water. You can use the juice from your strained fruits if you like. So just loosening the mixture. Imagine like in a recipe where you're using milk or water. This is the loosener, but it's not adding that, and it's adding to the sort of nutritional value. It's adding to the flavour of the cake, and it's also providing that little bit of that moisture too. And depending on what part of the world you're in, your flour will be slightly different. So sometimes, you might need to add a little bit more or less mix of it. This is the sort of consistency that you're looking for. So, and the other thing that I've forgotten to do was to add my spices, which I'm assuming you might have already done in that dry sifting stage. So again, this is quite all right if you've left this sort of ingredient out, but ideally, because it would be nice if it was more evenly distributed through the dry stuff, and I'm going to add mine now. I like to use some nutmeg. I always use fresh nutmeg when I use nutmeg because I always find it's much more pungent and much more flavoursome than pre-ground. So I'll just add some nutmeg while we're chatting. And I'm also using some allspice. But again, it's like the fruits. People have their own particular favourites. So you can add whatever spices you like, or you can leave spices out. That's what I'm going to add to my cake. What do you like, Sheridan? Do you add spices in your fruit cake?
Yes, I always think fruit cakes have spices in them.
Yeah.
And this is nutmeg, is it?
I've
never seen.
Well, you smell it. You smell
wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much nicer
if you
than
use that when you make
your powder packet.
Yeah. This is, and it just keeps, I just keep in a little airtight. But you just grate as much as you like, but you try and use some fresh nutmeg, even cheese things.
It makes such a difference.
And this is allspice, which is actually a spice.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's what I would have thought.
Yeah,
it's not allspice. You seem to think allspice is
a berry.
Spices.
It is.
Okay.
But it's different from mixed spice, which is a mixture of sort of cloves and cinnamon and so on.
It's a bit tricky, isn't it?
Yes, but I would particularly like spice. So that's all right. I'm just adding a bit of that to mine. Okay. I hope I haven't lost you. So you might take some time to prepare your tin if you haven't already, and catch up if you're finding it. Hope I'm not going too fast for you. But now we're just going to basically add our fruits. That's about everything else. So this is my 600 grams of my fruits that that I've prepared. So if you're adding fruit, you can add that now. Gosh, I love that smell. It's just like such a smell coming for Christmas. It's such a Christmas smell. And the smell of Christmas fruitcakes baking is, oh, it's just wonderful. I love it. So I'm just folding it through, okay? Just so that it's combined. Just nice. Anything else I should have in here? Sheridan, have I forgotten anything? So I'm not
okay.
looking and talking to a camera. No, that went in.
Oh, that
You
went in.
did that. I think that's everything.
We seem to have everything.
Yeah, give me a shout if I goof.
What about these folks?
Oh, I was just explaining this. They're my prunes, but I cut them up. I just cut mine up. I cut my fruit up with scissors. You know, kitchen ones that you just use for food. I never put it in a food processor and blend it. It just turns into a bit mush. Yeah. So you just, you know, again, it's sort of like you can, you know, obviously buy a mix and leave fruits, but often some of the fruits are a larger size, and so when you go to cut a cake and you've got a larger piece of fruit, it makes it harder for cutting. That's why you're cutting them up.
Ah, right.
That's why.
Okay. So that's it. That's the cake.
It. And I'm just going to put it in my tin. So I'm just going to use a big spoon for that. Clean my.
See if no one's got any questions.
Have you got any questions out there? I hope you're just enjoying this smell and the look.
Someone's asking, how long does the cake keep for?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, one of the things about the alcohol in the cake, which is traditionally now what you're doing, is it acts as a preservative as well, keeps it. And that's why fruitcakes were very popular years ago, because people didn't have access to the same levels of refrigeration.
Right, okay.
And so
it's like salt meat and fruitcake.
That's it. So you could keep a fruitcake outside of the you know, refrigeration. So this fruitcake, if once it's cool, you can, if you're not ready yet to eat it, or you know, decorate it when you're ready to eat it, you can just wrap it up in cling film, nice and tightly, and you can just put it in, you know, put it in the fridge and keep it in the fridge. Okay, you know, in our part of the world, it tends to be a bit warmer. But if you're in another part of the world where it's a bit cooler, or even you're living out where a house you've got some sort of cool air, just wrap it and put it in a box or something, and just somewhere cool and dark, and it will be fine.
Because there is that tradition of the wedding cake, which is also a fruit cake, and people keep their wedding cake sometimes for years.
Yes, well, that was part of why you know, years ago. That's why part of the reason why it was often a fruit cake, was so that allowed you to keep that.
Yes. But
being a wedding cake maker myself, it's rare now that I get asked to make fruit cakes.
Right.
Well, you know, it's not as popular having a fruit cake now. Still, some people do ask that, but you can freeze your cakes.
Okay.
Because we've got access to freezers, so you can just freeze your cakes and frost them when you're ready to. So you can have whatever cake you like for your wedding cake.
Okay, so we're going to get the cake in the oven, and, we've had one more question about the temperature, the oven temperature.
All right, okay.
Because it's a bit hard to hear.
Okay, so I'm suggesting 140. But as I said, when I did big explanation about oven temperature, you know, some ovens might run hotter than that, because even though the dial says 140, but roughly 140. So if that means when you can't turn your fan off, I would, if you've got fan forced oven and you can't turn the fan off, I suggest about 130. Okay, so 140. If you've sort of got one of those dials where you can't actually see very accurately, sort of 140-ish. If you open the oven door and you sort of don't get blasted by the heat, that's probably a good heat.
Okay.
But if it's removed the skin from your face, then
way too hot.
Way too hot. So I'm just spooning that into the tin. I'll show you what that looks like in there in a minute, what to do. Sheridan's just run. She keeps disappearing out of picture because what she's doing, she's looking at your questions and so on, so that I can answer them. And having been in your position before, where you're trying to bake and tweet and ask questions and so on, you keep running away to do that or whatever, and you think, oh, wait for me. So hopefully I'm not going too fast for you.
I think we've covered all the questions.
All right. Okay.
I know there's a bit of a time delay there's a very slight, maybe 30-second time delay with what people are seeing.
All right.
And what we're doing.
Okay. All right.
But I think we're fine.
We're going all right. Now, this bit's an interesting bit, which I was doing. You know when you put your fruitcake or something of this consistency into the tin, you're sort of looking like that, and you're thinking, oh, yeah, well, you know, what do I do? How do I flatten that out? This is what you do. You get like a cloth. Yeah. This is so that when you're baking like me in the early hours of the morning, you don't have to wake people up. And you just drop it. You drop it a few times on the bench. Because what's happening is that then levels your cake out. And also, because you've been putting big globs of batter in there, you might get big bubbles of air trapped in there. Yes. Which is fine when it's sort of warm and so on, but then, you know, it caves in after the cake comes out of the oven. It's almost like you've created your own mine shaft in your cake. So this is a way of getting rid of that. Okay. So you don't get that tunneling in your cake. So you just drop that in a few times, and it levels it out for you and evens it. Puts the cake mix will move to the you know, evenly across the thing. So this is just to steady the sound of it. Okay. Drop it on the floor if you want to. Bounce your cake, yeah. So that's what that's for. And then what I do is put, now you would have had 2 extra circles, and I put these on top of my cake. Oh. And that is again to give it a bit of protection. It's like putting a little face mask.
That makes sense, because I know because fruitcakes cook for such a long time, I noticed that it's possible to burn the top of them. Yes.
Well, if you're burning your fruitcake, Sheridan, your oven's up too high.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, or you've left it in there for about 3 days. Put your paper on top like that, and you can see, look, you can touch the surface of your cake and flatten it without getting it all stuck to you. Yes, excellent. But what that is putting that, it's like, it's all nicely wrapped up and secure. So it's going to bake, but it's not exposed, you know, it's protected a bit from the harsh Sahara elements that are happening in your oven, which is like a, you know, hot, dry wind if you've got a fan and stuff. Yeah. But I, as I say, that's just my thing of baking. Everybody bakes differently. I bake conventionally, and so I'll put that in about the middle of the oven, in height, and okay, so we're going to put them in the oven. So ideally you would have preheated your oven to about 140. If you haven't done that, just wait till your oven reaches temperature before you put the cakes in.
It's not going to harm the cake for it to sit.
No, absolutely not. It'll be fine. In fact, you could leave that there and go shopping. But it's really important because some of the modern ovens, when they're heating up to reach their temperature, they almost go into turbo mode, so they heat really hot. So if you put your cake in while it's getting itself organised, the oven, you can actually, it's almost like grill your cake. So just wait, be patient, don't worry about it, nothing's going to happen to it. You can admire, stand here, admire your handiwork. I tried to do a little bow. Alright, check. How are we going?
We're putting the cake in the oven.
Alright, okay. Can you put that in the oven? I'm putting mine in the oven outside because it's a bit hot in here today with the lights as well, so that's what we're going to do. So while that cake's in the oven, and I think it was going to take at least an hour and a half. So put your cake in your oven. Don't go away. We've got all sorts of people who are going to be joining us to talk about things like organic farming. I'm really interested because there's farmers there, and I know that Sheridan, one of the reasons why you asked me to get involved in this is because it's really important to me that that we don't forget about where our food comes from, and you know that there's respect for ingredients. It's really important to me to know that somebody is spending their life raising these chickens well and producing these beautiful eggs for me, beautiful dairy, beautiful flour for me to make lovely cakes. And if they weren't doing that, I think we'd be in serious trouble. So right. I'm really pleased that we've got farmers going to be joining us too, so we can hear what it's like to be a farmer and a producer.
Yes.
And I want them to know that as somebody in the city, that I really value what they're doing, and if there's anything I can do in my own way, like this with baking days, talking to people about the ingredients, the quality of the ingredients, and the expertise of our farmers in this country is second to none. And we've got to look after our farmers and producers so that we can have beautiful food like this to eat and enjoy.
That's right. Well, I guess what we really need to do is ask Whisper, who's at our headquarters, in the technical headquarters, who we've got online, because I know some people have had some technical issues. Unfortunately, Dr. Kristen Lyons is unable to join us today because she's not well, and Whisper was trying to line up someone else at the last minute. Blessings to Whisper. Hopefully we've got someone coming through. But we're not sure at this point in time, because we can't see the screen that you're looking at, who's online and ready to start chatting with us. So perhaps, Whisper, if you can give us a heads up on that.